Michael Conneely, and this is a Star Wheel webinar looking at the Navamsha chart of members. And basically, the Navamsha chart is a Vedic astrology chart. It's what's called a divisional chart. It's derived from the birth chart. It's the 9th harmonic chart, which means that its signs are pasted together ninths of the signs of the birth chart. And I have sent out a lengthy document to students, and in that it explains how to build a Navamsha. But of course, most people nowadays would use a computer program. And I want to say that if you need anything at all, any charts or information, just ask me. So what does the Navamsha chart depict? Well, it's the most important of the divisional charts because it depicts our marriage issues and our soul issues. In the written coursework, you come across a Navamsha chart exercise in the rules consolidation documents, which you do in between the planet studies. And this is an absolutely vast task. Sadly, I just don't see that it would be right to look at everybody's Navamsha chart and analyze it, because each chart more or less takes a session. It takes, at the minimum of an hour. And so if anybody wanted to do an interpretation of their Navamsha chart and send it to me, that would be fine. If anyone wanted to do an analysis of their Ishta Devata, their ideal form of the divine to work with, according to Vedic astrology, and whether they agreed with what the method said, that would be fine. And also, in the documents I sent you, there's a description of how to work out Rashi Tulya. And again, if you wanted to work out Rashi Tulya, in your case, that would be great. So Rashi Tulya is a statement of what our soul is sending us in this lifetime. And sometimes it can be strengthening, and sometimes it can send us challenges. And again, you could work out, if you wanted, there's 3 possible exercises, or you could simply wait till you get to the relevant rules consolidation documents. But I'd be very glad to really go into detail if you wanted to send me any of those 3 now. Anything else I want to say? Yes. I'm sort of feeling a bit nervous because the obvious chart for me to discuss is my Navamsha chart. And, it wouldn't have been my first choice. But, and the other thing is, always in our work, we want to link the perception offered by Vedic astrology to artwork, where we learn even more about it by drawing it, quickly sketching it, embodiment work, which we haven't done much of so far, but will, and healing modalities. So if a particular challenge is discovered, you don't just legalistically say the person has this problem. And I've definitely had that done to me by eminent Vedic astrologers. Basically, you use the perception as a doorway to transformation, to healing, to empowerment. And that's the essence of our work. So we could see what we come up with now, but definitely we'll have a session of that type at the end, which is indeed at 9 o'clock UK time. I got it wrong last time and overran because of the change of time. Oh, and let me say very importantly that we're moving from using Hangouts to using Zoom. And so the next webinar in a fortnight's time will be using Zoom. And Maggie is going to send you the link to log on to the Zoom in a fortnight's time at 7:30 UK time, and also a little video of how to use Zoom. And why are we changing? Well, actually, Zoom is simpler and the visual quality is better, and the audio quality I'm hoping will be better. But most importantly, Zoom allows one to show computer screens live. So I can show you Word documents using Hangouts, but I can't talk you through the various screens of your Sri Jyoti Star Vedic Astrology, your AstroCalc Western Astrology, your Megastar Swiss Huber School Western Astrology. So from now on, you'll be able to see all the many possible charts, which is a huge bonus. And the topic in a fortnight's time is our transits for 2016. So definitely looking, I'll make sure I apportion the time to the main trends in everybody's life next year. And I'll send you all a good quality and extensive computer-generated Western astrology prediction. So that'll reach you within a week. And also I will send you a potted meaning of Western astrology transits, sort of buzzwords, based on Reinhold Ebertin. And also a standard brief but good quality meaning on all the transits of Vedic astrology. So, you know, you can look at your charts before the webinar in a fortnight's time. And of course, anybody else's you want to study. And well, as I said, 4 new webinars start in 2016. They run from the first week of February to the first week of November. They're weekly. And of course, you can download them if the time isn't convenient. And of course, you get all the needed charts and information beforehand. And basically, they are level 1 Vedic. And that's quite a wonderful webinar where we meditate and experience the energies of each of the planets, of each of the houses, of each of the signs, of the aspects, all the nuts and bolts of level 1 Vedic astrology. Each webinar we look at the charts of members. Each webinar we do some healing artwork or embodiment. And then there's level 2 Vedic astrology, which is, you know, absolutely wonderful. It's the nakshatras, and you don't actually need any Vedic astrology knowledge to do the level 2 course, but actually to have some is a good idea. And so for the first 27 weeks, we will look at one nakshatra after another. That's not quite true, because the very first week we'll simply be reviewing the analysis frameworks, you know, the gunas, the doshas, what are they, sort of thing. But of course, you deepen your knowledge of the frameworks as you study each nakshatra. So the 27 weeks after that, we just do one nakshatra a week, a sort of sublime spiritual depiction and meditation. We look at how that nakshatra features in each person's birth chart, what planets they have in it, and what that means. And then when we've gone through all 27, we move on to very powerful nakshatra analysis tools, the derived nakshatra systems. the health astrology based on nakshatras, particular systems for analysing nakshatra transits, which are very valid but not much known about. Oh yes, and of course reading the nakshatras not only from the moon but also from the ascendant and the sun. I mean, there's a very special nakshatra system based on the sun. So that's a sort of broad outline of the level 2 course. Level 3 is advanced Vedic astrology, where we study the Medi techniques and every time we apply them to the charts of members. And then there's the level 1 Vedic astrology, which will start off with a meditation and vision work on the true nature of each of the planets of Western astrology, one a week, and applying that insight to the charts of members, and then go on how to view the divine light of each of those planetary archetypes through filters, if you like, planets in signs, planets in houses, and planets within aspects. We then go on to look at nature versus nurture and chart aspect shapes and some psychodynamic theory like hemispheres, quadrants, that sort of thing. In 2017, there will also be a level 2 Vedic astrology, and there will also be a level 2 Western astrology, and there will also be a level 4 Vedic astrology. Okay, so let's get on with the Navamsha. With the Navamsha. And so I sent you quite extensive notes on how to interpret the Navamsha. So what I feel I could best do to make it real is to look at the Navamsha in my chart to start with and see how we go. Now I can immediately see I've got a problem of too many screens, so I'm just going to have to quickly shut down some screens, and of course this won't happen when we're using Zoom. So File, Exit. This will make it better. File, Quit. Now then, hold on. And if I can close that, I'll probably have a better chance of doing a chart share successfully. Right, where are we? So, yes. Okay, let's choose the members charts document. And this is updated to include Mumtaz, the latest member. And of course, if you want updated documents of any sort, just contact me. So, let me find my chart within the document. So, here is my Vedic birth chart, ascendant in Cancer, Moon in the 9th house Pisces, obviously Gandanta at 2956 Pisces, and Sun, Rashi Sandhi, edge of sign, fallen in Libra, conjunct Ketu and Mercury in the 4th house. So that is my birth chart. We now move to look at my Navamsha chart, my chart of marriage and soul issues. Okay, we see instantly that my ascendant, and I showed you how to build the Navamsha chart in the documents I sent you, is actually in a Scorpio Navamsha. So that means that in my Navamsha chart, the ascendant is in Scorpio, very closely conjunct Mercury. And that sets a whole tone for my destiny. Notice that Moon is emboldened in Pisces and Sun is emboldened in Libra. That's because they are in the same sign in the Navamsha chart as in the Rashi or birth chart. In other words, they're Vargotama. And that is always said to be a great strength and blessing. But incidentally, my first tutor for the first sort of generic course I did in Vedic Astrology said he was sort of unsure how to interpret the fact that he said he'd never met anyone with Sun and Moon Vargotama, and he was unsure how to interpret it because the Moon is Gandanta and so very problematic, although it is the ruler of the birth chart. My ascendant, Rashi ascendant, is Cancer, and the Sun is, in my birth chart, deeply fallen in Libra. And so he said, well, how does having planets in such challenge, what does that make of the fact that they're Vargotama? And there are two opinions. One is that it's still weakening. It is weakening to have the Lagnatia, so the ascendant lord, in a deeply fallen situation like Gandanta. It makes the person weaker. But the other opinion, and both are true, is that in the middle of this very special karmic challenge of having a dreadful sun and a dreadful moon, even more, well, both awful, soul is sending me constant blessings. And certainly when I've had sort of psychic and spiritual readings, the readers have said that I have, lots of sort of helpers, in the angelic realm, as they would put it, within their framework. And so I think I've been sent many difficulties, but I'm being sent constant blessings to deal with them. And that's what the Vargotama points to. If you have a Vargotama planet, it gives great purity of definition and awareness. You can come in your lifetime to a true understanding, a pure and clear understanding of the nature and karmic message of your moon or your sun. And I feel that's very much come to me recently, albeit at the age of 67, in my just completed Rahu moon period, where I stripped away so many associations that I felt were very bad for me, and really said, this is me, and I want a need to express myself in this way in my life. Whether I'm fully expressing my sun, I don't know. Incidentally, what comes to my mind is that the sidereal symbol for my sun is that this particular degree of Chitra, of Libra, in my birth chart, this is not the Navamsha which we're looking at now, is a person who will just try and try and try and try and will eventually reach their perfection. That's the sidereal symbol for my sun at the second degree of Libra, 121 Libra in Chitra. And of course the symbol for Chitra is a pearl, whereby the pearl is inside a dull and boring shell, but once the shell opens, creation of great beauty is found. Because of course Chitra is ruled by Vishvakarma, the heavenly architect. It is about creating something beautiful in this life. Whether it's a trade or martial arts or writing books or whatever. So I've mentioned Navamsha, Vargotama within the Navamsha. Let's look at the Navamsha ascendant. Well, mine is Scorpio. So that says that remember the Navamsha is the chart of marriage and the soul. Well, as regards marriage, I will tend to be scorpionic, in other words, intense. Not me at all, really, but that's what the Vedic astrology says. And as regards soul, it's investigative and occult. But notice that Mercury is very closely conjunct the Navamsha ascendant. And so that tells us that speaking and teaching and thinking, all the Mercury qualities, are an essential part of my soul that unfolds from incarnation to incarnation. Notice that Mercury is retrograde, which means that I'll have challenges, get loads of things upside down and spend ages to understand things, etc., etc. But that only makes the learning more deep, more spiritual. One comes to realization of what things are all about when the time is right. And an awful lot has come through for me lately, as indeed Saturn was transiting over my natal Mars in Scorpio in my birth chart. Mars in Rashi Scorpio, deeply penetrating and occult. Now let's look at Rashi Tulya. So basically, on this side, it's the right for me. It might be the left in your, depending on what Hangouts is doing. There is my Navamsha, and here is my Rashi or my birth chart. So what Rashi Tulya does is puts the message of the soul into the birth chart, and then interprets it according to 12 techniques. And I've given you a very abbreviated sort of buzzword so that you can apply each to your Rashi Tulya operation, seeing how your soul maps into your birth chart. So looking at it in mind, the techniques are called Bhava Sushaka, by the way. So my ascendant moves 5 signs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there is my Navamsha ascendant in Scorpio, and it's moved 5 signs. And so 5 is seen as quite a sort of creative number. I have given you the meaning of each of these in another document. I'm just wondering if I can stop sharing the chart and share the buzzwords. Let's just see. So we'll try a chart share. Yes, it should be here. So that is for Maggie. So if we go to mine, have I put this in? No, I don't seem to have done. So basically, here they are. Here's the meaning. So 5 is creative, blessed, and good use of energy. So that is the energy my soul is sending me into my ascendant. So as I purify my life and learn from my mistakes and my challenges, a blessing will flower and manifest. Indeed, I could not believe my Rashi Tulya analysis when I did it, because it is so favourable. So although the start in my life, is depicted in Vedic astrology as very difficult, an exceptionally favourable gift is coming from my soul. Now let's look at the sun. Oh yes, so of course the sun obviously is Vargotama, and that is a very pure apprehension of why you are here. And I feel I made a lot of progress in that in the last year. How you should be egoically. The moon is Vargotama, and I feel I made an awful lot of progress in that in the last year, realizing how I wasn't living up to my true nature, maybe through associations that weren't good for me, purifying that, and particularly I think dealing with issues of my birth family by going to Ireland in September on the advice of a psychic reader. And indeed, quite amazing things have happened. She said, you've got to go there because there's an energy in the rocks waiting to come into your body. It turned out the place she saw was where my family has lived for hundreds of years. And of course, I'm a secret from them. But amazingly, since then, my type 2 diabetes has disappeared. I went for a checkup at the doctor's, a 6-monthly regular checkup, and I sort of utterly amazed them. It's gone. I've had psoriasis since I was 14. It's gone. Since I had shock onset diabetes, incidentally, it was when my family broke up. I found life muzzy and a struggle, and that has gone. This is me not struggling, by the way. So this is quite sort of amazing, and it was in the Rahu moon period. It was at the very end of it, its culmination. So let's look at Mars. Now my Mars, so whose chart is this? Yes, well, hang on. Yeah, this is my chart. So my Mars is in the Scorpio 5th in my birth chart, but in the Navamsha, it's in Virgo conjunct Venus. So in fact, it's moved 11 signs, which means it can bring me gain. Well, I'm actually in my Rahu Mars period now, and I do believe I shall experience some gain next year in all the foundation work I'm doing, which I think will come to its fulfillment at the end of next year when I go into a completely new dasha, a completely new Vedic predictive period, my Jupiter dasha. And Rahu Mars, I'm working very, very hard, but it's all effective. And I think I'm valuing it more. Mercury moves 2 houses. So yes, here it is in my birth chart, conjunct Ketu and the Sun in Libra, and it moves to Scorpio in the Navamsha. Maybe I will make income, gain, Dharma from teaching or writing and that sort of thing. Jupiter. My Jupiter is in the 6th house in Sagittarius. Very, very powerful. It's Mula Trikona. And it moves 5 signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. Which again is very creative. My Venus moves 2 signs, 1, 2, so there it is there, which again is creative. So, you could try and analyze what would be Venus conjunct Saturn in the 2nd house. Well, I tend to write novels and books about ancient spiritual forms. And I mean, that would certainly fit. The 2nd house is about mouth, and Venus is conjunct Saturn. So, what else have we? Yes, Saturn. So my Saturn is in the second house in my birth chart, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 signs to the Navamsha, which again will bring gain, but being Saturn with delay. Rahu and Ketu each move 4 signs, which makes them powerful. And notice that my Rahu in the birth chart is in Aries in the 10th, and Rahu does well in Aries and does well in the 10th career. But of course you must purify it. We all have to purify Rahu. Rahu's the direction of our incarnational life purpose this time. But it's surrounded by the smoke of delusion. It's tinged with obsession and driven nature until we get it right and purify it. But, you know, I am in my Rahu period now, and I seem to remember, I won't go off screen to check, but I'm pretty sure when I started it, I'd love to go off screen and check. I think it's roughly when I started the 5-year social anthropology of spiritual forms new to the West, which has produced all these courses and books. So what I want to do is try and look, having looked at Rashi Tulya, at a few more I'm just wondering if I stop the share. I mean, for example, the Navamsha as marriage chart. Let's look at that. So I'm just wondering which would be the best document to do that. Let's try the chart document. So let's see if I can find it. So if I could at least find my Navamsha chart, I could talk through it. Okay, so the first thing you look at is Venus. Well, Venus is fallen in Virgo in my Navamsha. And so that immediately says that Venus will not be able to express himself well. Lord Shukra is cramped in Virgo. And Venus is conjunct Mars, which isn't good because Mars is, you know, quite sort of aggressive and driven. And Venus doesn't like Mars near him. Indeed, when Venus and Mars are conjunct in the heavens, there's all sorts of pressures in relationships and people start screaming at each other. I mean, as a worst case, there can even be assaults. And of course, we've had that recently with Venus, Mars, and Rahu, all three conjunct at the start of Virgo recently. But of course, there's a divine meaning there to go through that, to learn in a higher way what love is. And Venus rules the 12th house. Well, I mean, so that can be loss through marriage, and indeed that has been the case. It also rules the 7th house of marriage itself. And of course, one of the special houses you look at to interpret the Navamsha chart, obviously, is the 7th house. You look at the 1st house and the 10th house of every Varga chart or divisional chart. And of course, you look at its own special house, which in the case of the Navamsha is the 7th for marriage and the 9th for spirituality. So, of course, my 7th being Taurus, we get back to all the Venus issues. Venus fallen in Virgo, conjunct Mars and Lord of the 12th. So it's not an easy script for marriage, but one which, could be perfected as one comes to understand one's nature and the nature of love and all that sort of thing. And as I've said, the first house obviously affects marriage, the first house of the Navamsha, and so that would put me as intense and analytic. I mean, Mercury can be critical, but obviously, again, not in my case. And so perhaps enough said there. Anything else I would look at in my Navamsha chart? Well, the 10th house is, of course, Leo, and the Lord of the 10th is in the 12th house, which is weakening and loss. So, on the face of it, at a mundane level, these are all challenges, one could say, for marriage. But the Navamsha is also the chart of the soul. And to have Navamsha ascendant in Scorpio obviously gives deep penetrating occult investigation and understanding, conceptualization and study with the Mercury there, and teaching. Rahu is in the 9th house in the Navamsha. Ketu is in the 3rd house. Now, I put up some meanings of that in the other documents, but basically, the 3rd house is obviously the house of obstacles and challenges in this world, and to have Ketu there can make one very unworldly and mystical and world-denying, with all the strengths and dangers that carries. But Rahu in the 9th, of course, impels one to study the spiritual big picture, to seek out gurus. Jupiter is important to consider in anybody's Navamsha chart. My Jupiter is in the 6th house Sagittarius in my birth chart, and it's in the 6th house Aries in my Navamsha chart. So that immediately, well, Jupiter, 6th house is not a good house, it's Dushtana, but it's also Upachaya. It can get better in the course of a lifetime if we learn the lessons. And of course, the 6th house is all about health, so it's health problems, but also healing and right living, and, right living regimes, what's the correct way to live for you, and service. So to have my Jupiter in both the 6th house in the birth chart and the 6th house in Navamsha means that I am called to utilize my sort of spiritual expansion in service to others. And of course that, can be a challenge if it's not also service to oneself. My Jupiter is incredibly strong. And of course that can be a problem. I mean, to have it in the 6th house of the birth chart can mean enemies and illness, because the 6th house is all about resistance to enemies, resistance to disease. A strong Jupiter can be so ungrounded. I think one of my problems is I'm always inventing system after system. I throw up courses, like no one I've ever met. I just sort of create a course and say, all the bits will fall into place, Well, of course, we hope that's true. But you see, Jupiter can be malefic. A strong Jupiter can be like a first-class malefic because it can be glitzy and ungrounded. So have I learned the lesson? I don't think so quite. Help. Now, the other thing that we particularly need to look at in the Navamsha is the Ishtadevata. So I'm going to try and find that document. The screen share didn't work. Here we are. It should be in here. So let's just try and bookmark it and find it. Here it is. Right. What we need to understand is the Karakamsha. The Atmakarika, when it's in the Navamsha chart, is called the Karakamsha. Of course, because my moon is Atmakarika and my moon is in the same sign in the Rashi as the Navamsha, my Karakamsha is in Pisces in both cases. And there is a technique in Vedic astrology. Not everyone agrees with it, and there are disagreements about how you interpret it, and it can be used horrifically, legalistically, and formulaically. You can go online and calculate your Ishtadevata in a very legalistic way. But you see, the 12th house from the Karakamsha is all about your spiritual liberation, how you will find moksha or salvation. And you have to consider whether the 12th house from the Karakamsha is ruled by a benefic or a malefic sign, and that will affect the sort of deity you would be drawn to. And if there are 2 occupying planets, you select the strongest. If there are no occupying planets, you choose the lord of the house. If there are 2 lords, remember that Scorpio and Aquarius are co-lorded by Ketu and Rahu respectively, as well as Scorpio by Mars and Aquarius by Saturn. You choose the lord that's the strongest. And if it's an odd sign in your 12th house from Karakamsha, they suggest you consider a male deity, and an even sign a female deity. Some people say you've got to take into account the 12th from the Atmakarika in the birth chart as well. But most people look at the Navamsha, and both have influence. Everything in Vedic astrology needs to move to a level of judgment and discrimination rather than being formulaic or legalistic. And so the 12th house from the Atmakarika indicates our bondages in this lifetime, whereas the 12th house from the Karakamsha in the Navamsha indicates our Ashtadevata. So here's a chart that was taught to me by my first guru. Now, my 12th house is Aquarius, and the standard suggestion is either Rama or Krishna. So this is obviously within a Vedic framework. So you might like to consider, well, what is being said in absolute terms, taking it wider than the Vedic framework. Incidentally, both of those are avatars of Lord Vishnu. If you remember, Lord Vishnu sort of lays back in ecstasy, dreaming universes in and out of being. And as he emanates a universe, it gets further and further from him, further and further from the divine. And so he sends avatar after avatar to try and save the world, but eventually things get darker and darker, and so he absorbs the fallen world and emanates another. And so he has sent a number of avatars. I feel myself that Lord Rama is my ideal avatar. And what comes to my mind is that oddly, in the novels I have written, and in the novel I'm currently writing about the gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish, always there's a young man hero, and of course that's what Rama was. It's the hero's quest. And of course it also exists in ancient Babylon. I'm just trying to remember the name of the great hero in ancient Babylon, the oldest epic of all. It's a wonderful epic. Can't remember just offhand. But always the hero ends up, after his great journey, back home. And so indeed this paradigm may well be the most helpful exemplar divine form for me. I can see a lot in that, more so maybe than Krishna, which is of course a very different energy. Krishna plays his flute to manifest the created world. We are the playing of Krishna's flute, and as we strip out ego, we become a conduit for the playing of Krishna's flute. But I don't think that is me. I think I have a Rama-like task in my lifetime, in this lifetime. So here's my Navamsha. There is my Karakamsha, the moon. There's the 12th house, which is Aquarius. And ruled by Saturn, that means Rama in my case, and I'm happy with that. So other spiritual dimensions of Navamsha houses. The 9th house shows your Dharma Devata. Well, what can we make of that? The protector of your spiritual path. Navamsha 9th. Well, my Navamsha 9th is Cancer, ruled by the moon. And the moon is clearly Vargotama in my chart. So if one accepts this, the divine moon would be the protector of my path. In other words, purifying my consciousness, raising my level of awareness, stabilizing my mind if possible. Remember that the 9th house, although this is debated, is also father in the Navamsha. And my 9th house contains Rahu and Gulika, Gulika being one of the shadow children of Saturn who you wouldn't want to meet. And this fits because Rahu is all about foreignness, and my father was indeed a foreigner. I only met him once when I was 40-something, and he was a Pole who fled from the Nazi invasion. And so indeed that would fit Neptune. He was an illusory father, as indeed was my adoptive father, who had Asperger's syndrome and didn't want children adopted. So I mean that would fit very well, 9th house as father. But as I said, some people say yes, some people say no. Most say yes. Special abilities. The first, fifth, and ninth house gives you special abilities. Well, my first house is obviously Mercury in Scorpio, and I have discussed that. I would say penetrating analysis. I mean, I have got 5 university degrees and done so much studying, endless studying, and communication, writing, and teaching. My 5th house, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the Navamsha, is Pisces with the moon, which is Vargotama. And I think I see that as creatively working through issues of consciousness, particularly in my books. And then, of course, the other trinal house is the 9th. Well, Rahu impels me to spiritual study and indeed foreign connection. I don't think I've ever gone down well with the British. And in trying to, as it were, be British, it just hasn't worked. I don't think I ever fitted in. But I feel I do well in foreign parts and with foreign paradigms and spiritual pathways. So what else can we pick up? So the effects of dignity you have to consider. Oh yes, and you need to look at your Dasha and Bhukti lords, how they do in the Navamsha, to try and get the fullest predictive analysis. So I am now in Rahu Mars, and so Rahu is in my 9th house of spiritual endeavor, the guru energy, foreign parts. Well, I'm doing 4 worldwide webinars. I'm writing a novel about the gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish. You name it. I'm teaching to people in different countries. That's Rahu. Mars in the 11th. Well, could that mean gain? Hopefully. I think it will. You see, the 11th house is the house of gains, but I've got Saturn transiting my Mars at the moment, which of course means like a death and rebirth meltdown. So you lose attributes you shouldn't have, so as to purify your efforts when you've got a Saturn to Mars transit. And when you're working, therefore, more appropriately, albeit it seems very, very hard, you then start to make structured gains. And I do believe that will be the case for my Rahu Mars period that I've just started. So I'd like now to try and look at other charts. I'm sorry. I think you can see that it would be nonsense to try and just go through everybody's chart, because I think the quality would be disastrous. And as I said, there are 3 exercises you can do, which I'm very, very happy to fully respond to if you email me them. Let's just look at Maggie's Navamsha and Rashi Tulya, if I can find that, because the documents get a bit large. Here we are. So here's Maggie's Navamsha, here is her Rashi, and so in the birth chart it's ascendant in Libra, so issues of balance, every house is balanced. Sun in Libra, so Sun very close to its greatest debilitation. Moon in the 7th house in Ashwini, in Aries. Notice that Maggie has a Vargotama moon like I do. Notice that Maggie has Vargotama Jupiter. And indeed, in her Navamsha, she has Jupiter conjunct Rahu, which is considered dangerous. It's Guru Chandala Yoga. And it can carry the danger of being drawn to bad teachers or somehow tarnished spiritual forms or groups. But of course, one can purify to make sure one isn't losing self in groups. Remember, and this applies to Louise as well, to have Sun most deeply fallen means you lose yourself in groups. Notice that Maggie's Jupiter is most deeply fallen in Capricorn. But it's Vargotama, so just like me, Maggie has a most deeply fallen planet that is Vargotama. You could say she incarnated to get it right, because Jupiter's on the nodal axis, and my goodness, so is Mars. So that gives an extra special dimension of importance to have a planet on the nodal axis in the Navamsha. So with Maggie's Jupiter being Vargotama, her soul will send her endless messages about issues of expansion and husband. And because Jupiter's in her 4th house, it usually means a mother who could not allow expansion to the child. So if we look at the Rashi Tulya, the ascendant is in Libra in the birth chart and in Aries in the soul chart, and so it's 180 degrees or Jayamsha, which is said to be very difficult because the person tries to straddle all sides and agree with everyone, loses themselves in expression, and that really does need to be understood and transcended. And it can make for sort of wobbling instability, but of course at its best that's transformation. The Sun is in the 6th house, which is unfavorable. So Sun in Libra, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In Pisces, Sun in Pisces. They're very different energies. Libra is an air sign. Pisces is a water sign. The 1st house is me first. The 12th house is about, can be loss, but foreign parts. But spiritual institutions. And so it's as if Maggie's soul would be calling her from riding the 2 impossibly difficult horses of Libra and me first, Sun in the 1st, Sun in Libra, to a spiritual journey, possibly in foreign parts, for success. Very mystical. And so, of course, I think you can see how her worldly sun and her soul sun are actually very different. And so, hopefully that's useful perception if she agrees with it. Her moon is Vargotama, and so, of course, she is Ashwini, which is very sort of driven, and it's Rajas. But out of that comes the healer of the gods. That's what Ashwini is all about. It's, unique and sparkling at its best. Now, Mars isn't good. You see, Mars is 12th house, 1. Here it is in the birth chart, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Mars in the 12th house, and that's loss and waste of energy and unfocused and overgiving or not understanding their energy. Surfing on the internet would be a particular sort of danger with waste of energy. Can be productive, but of course it can be overdone and throw everything out of balance. But Mars is also conjunct Ketu, and that's difficult. It's sort of Bolshevik and anti-authority. Traditionally that's how it's seen. And of course, having Mars on the nodal axis in the division in the Navamsha is very important message for the soul to learn to get it right, develop awareness, develop healing. What can we say of Mercury? Well, Mercury moves 3, 1, 2, 3. There it is. And so the third house is all about obstacles, but overcoming them, courage and confidence. So obstacles to communication. Well, of course, having Mercury in Libra, indeed Mercury in Swati Nakshatra ruled by Rahu, I would think mean a problem of loss of self or balance, causing loss of integrity of the principle of the planet. That's how Libra is usually analyzed. In other words, where a planet's energy actually becomes separated from our grounded truth and reality. So, whether Maggie would need to develop courage and confidence in speaking simply from the heart. Just a suggestion what that might mean. Jupiter is Vargotama, so that is potentially ultimately very good for her very fallen Jupiter, and perhaps it will really come good when Maggie enters Jupiter Dasha, which I think is January 2017. Indeed, in the Navamsha, it's in her 10th house of career. In her birth chart, it's in the 4th house, which could well mean working from home for the best. Combining those two. Venus is struggle. So Venus is in the 3rd house, indeed, of obstacles and blocks in the birth chart. And it moves 6 houses into the Navamsha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And of course, the 6th house is Dushtana, but it's also Upachaya. It gets better with age if we learn the lessons. And her nodes are, and I think this was the same for me, Navamsha, making profit and spiritual gain. So in her birth chart, she has the nodes of an intuitive healer, Ketu in the 12th, Rahu in the 6th. So the 12th house is, well, potentially loss, but of course intuition. And Rahu is health, healing, right living, service, all that. So you use intuition to heal. That's the highest expression of it. By sign, Ketu is in the 6th sign, Virgo. Rahu is in the 12th sign, Pisces. And of course, remember, Maggie has a Libra ascendant, so everything is mirror image in her chart. Even her chart aspect shapes in Western astrology are very symmetrical. But in her soul chart, she is impelled to realize her spiritual destiny through career and expansion and husband issues. And I think to gain, yes, insight about the use of Mars to support career. Now, yes, there is in the document a blank table for you to work out your own Rashi Tulyas, and please do send it to me if you have time. So, what we could do now is look at people's charts, sadly very briefly, and then talk about a healing session type of thing with Maggie, or an embodiment or art. So just to go through them, I'm just going to stop the share and put up people's charts. So insert bookmark. And if you haven't got your Navamsha chart, obviously ask me, but I think everybody has. So the first person would be Lisa. And what do we find of Lisa's Navamsha? Here we are. Well, of course, I can't do a Rashi Tulya now, although Lisa could if she had time. So just looking at this, the 7th house of marriage has Ketu in it, which would not be seen as easy for marriage, but of course, if one learns the lesson, finding spiritual enlightenment within that, in other words, the Navamsha first house contains Rahu, about developing the self. But of course, because it's Libra, really, she has to sort of develop balance between self-expression and marriage. The moon is Vargotama and in the 9th house of spirituality, so a very wonderful spiritual teacher. She'll put her energy into gain through Mars. Oh, look, Jupiter in the 6th, like me, service to others and healing. I'm being terribly quick here. And if Lisa wanted to analyze her Navamsha, I'd, support that tremendously. Saturn in the 5th, children issues. So we'll just go back to the birth chart. And Rahu Saturn in the 5th. So I would say that with malefics in the 5th, we must all be very careful how we bring up our children. And we obviously so often get it wrong early on, but then maybe learn. So it's very important to share with the child and do our best to check out how we're parenting and so forth. Right. So her Karakamsha, is the moon. And so her Ishtadevata would be worked out based on Taurus. So, that's like a clue to consider there. So who would come next? Louise. And so here's Louise's Navamsha. Like me, Louise has Mercury very close to the Navamsha ascendant. Writer, scholar, Mars in the 12th, Saturn in the 5th. Saturn looks Vargotama. So the 7th house of marriage is Capricorn, ruled by Saturn in the Scorpio 5th. Traditionally, Moon in the 7th means that one is drawn to marriage, but one can fluctuate within it, and it's important to be aware if that's the case. Oh, and Venus is in Taurus in the 11th. That's very good for gains. So these are just stabs at meaning, and I hope if you can do the Navamsha exercise, that'd be wonderful. So Rebecca, a stab at meaning here. Moon Vargotama, Rahu and Ketu Vargotama. Ascendant in Leo conjunct Mars. 7th house in Aquarius, occupied by the Sun. And the Sun is 25. Ruling the ascendant, which is occupied by Mars. The 10th, Rahu is in the 10th house of career. This needs deep study, but I'd have thought to have Sun in the 7th house of marriage ruling Leo with Mars in it clearly means a marriage script of a very strong husband figure. Let's look at the 7th house in the Rashi. 7th house, of course, it's Capricorn like me, because like me you have a Cancer ascendant, and so Cancer ascendants always have a difficult time with marriage. Prince Charles, born 5 weeks after me, he has a Pushyami ascendant like me in Cancer, and his marital difficulties are sort of well known, and that difficulties with children, because Scorpio is always the 5th house for a Cancer ascendant. Jupiter conjunct Venus in the Navamsha 2nd. Which is obviously good for income and money, wealth. And Moon in the 11th house of gains. So these are only stabs at meaning, but it would be well worth, if you do get time, to analyze the Navamsha, do a Rashi Tulya exercise, and maybe an Ishtadevata exercise. David. So, Navamsha ascendant is in Libra. The 5th house contains Rahu and Saturn. The 7th house is Aries, ruled by Mars, where Mars is in its own sign. So I would have thought, I could be wrong, but like me, that points to quite, I would have thought, intense ways of relating to marriage. Making spiritual gains. So I'm just stabbing at meaning here, and if people would do the exercises to build on them, that would be wonderful. So Moon is in the 10th in the Rashi and the Navamsha, which is really making a career out of the expression and externalization of our consciousness. Yvonne? So, Navamsha ascendant is in Scorpio, occupied by the sun. So again, an intense life. Saturn Rahu in the 9th would be a very determined energy put into spiritual pathway, and indeed I think not an easy energy, inasmuch as the 9th is father. Jupiter in the 11th house of gains. So with Sun, Venus and Mercury in the 7th house in the Rashi, very attuned to marriage, but Sun is in the Navamsha 1st house. So whether that has a past life implication of moving from a first house, a me first emphasis more towards marriage. So the 7th house of the Navamsha is Taurus, ruled by Venus in the 8th. These are the sort of scripts you'd begin to look at if you examine the Navamsha. I can't remember what. I haven't got a statement of the Karakas. I don't think. Have I? What's the Atma Karaka? No, haven't got that. So if Yvonne hasn't got it, she could ask me, but I think she will have been sent it. And so, if she wanted to work out Ishta Devita from Atma Karaka, she could. Right, let's carry on. Solongo. So Mercury is Vargotama in the 12th house, and it's in the 1st house, Libra, like Maggie. Indeed, Solongo has Jupiter most deeply fallen in Capricorn 4th, like Maggie. And Solongo has Mars conjunct Venus, like I have in my Navamsha. Venus is Solongo's Atma Karika, so her Ishta Devita would be worked out from Libra. But you might use Mercury as a key to Ishta Devita because it occupies 12th house from Karakamsha. Mercury rules the 8th and the 11th with Rahu in it. I'm just wondering if that points to writing and teaching. But because it's in Libra, ruled by Venus Atma Karika, also use of art. And so we have Emma, and Emma's Navamsha. So her Navamsha ascendant is in Cancer, ruled by the moon. I'm just wondering if I did Rashi Tulya, not in this document, I don't think. I think I've done one for Emma. Okay, so Jupiter is in the 7th house of marriage, conjunct the yogi point. Navamsha, 10th house of career, is Aries, occupied by Sun and Saturn, which will give, slow delivering of career, but standing in status and success. So again, if Emma wanted to do any of the 3 exercises, that would be great. And lastly, Mumtaz. So Mumtaz has ascendant in Virgo in... Oh, that's her Navamsha. It says Vedic natal, but it's actually her Navamsha. Yes. So that's a sort of mistake I need to put in her Rashi chart there. So her Navamsha has, a very spiritual moon in the 9th. The 7th house of marriage is ruled by Jupiter, which is in the 3rd, conjunct Saturn and Mercury. So I think that would be, Jupiter conjunct Saturn as a, lording the 7th would be, when they're in the 3rd house, would be a sort of like working at steady commitment sort of energy. Again, fine if Mumtaz wanted to do the exercises. So I wonder if I could now talk to Maggie, and if Maggie can hear me. Can you hear me, Maggie?
Yeah.
Right. I was wondering if in the middle of all that, if any particular work, as an example, could be done. This may... Well, I was very struck by the fact that your most deeply fallen Jupiter is Vargotama. What did that mean to you?
Well, it was a priority. I think the thing that struck me the most, I
Yes.
suppose, looking at the the Rashi Tulya, I think it was the Rashi Tulya, was there were certain planets that were very different to each other, that didn't really understand each other, didn't get each other.
Definitely, yes.
And I think that might be a good thing to do some healing on. I don't think, I think in this webinar, I think it's, I'm just there to comment. I'm here to comment rather than to do any healing work, because I think we'd be stretching the webinar too much to do any healing. And also, I think I'm a little bit dazed with all the information that's been coming at me.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's been great information, so thank you. But I think it would be very good for almost like maybe allowing different aspects of your chart that don't understand each other to talk, and possibly talk to each other. And
yes, if I may build on what you've said, in your case, it was particularly that in Rashi Tulya, your ascendants were opposite each other. So that would try and make you straddle all sides, because you'd naturally assert in a Libran way, but in your Navamsha, the ascendant, I think, was in Aries. I think I've got that right. And your sun was in the first house of sort of me first in the Rashi. Indeed, some people would rightly say that sun in the first cancels debilitation. I would say very definitely that debilitation is still there, but that also you can have a strong sun, so you can fluctuate between the two.
Yes.
But anyway, yes, and that was in the first house. But then, of course, did you have sun in the 12th house in the Navamsha, which is totally different energy, like space cadet, mystic, and all that?
So I think that might be one area for healing. So to be able to and maybe be open to building bridges, really, between maybe the building a difference between your Rashi and your Navamsha somehow. I mean, although I've been hanging around an astrologer for a long time, if you like, I haven't studied astrology in anything like the depth that your students have. So am I right that really the Navamsha is our kind of soul's expression of ourselves in this lifetime? Would that be a good... I know it's a marriage chart as well, but
it's both. Yes.
Is it where how we're invited to become, really?
Well, it's also said to become that. We are said to become more like our Navamsha in the course of a lifetime if we pursue a spiritual path. It is the chart of our soul which calls to us and gives to us, but it trenchantly declares our marriage issues.
Yes. So in a way, it's very much flagging up what we're being called to become. Is that right?
Yes.
So, one way of working with that might be to work with any confidence issues in dealing with what we're asked to become. And you could do some EFT on that. You could go, even though I really don't know how to overcome whatever it is, and tap on that. And then you could even perhaps invite inviting whatever guidance. I mean, you can even tap on inviting in guidance, can't you? Tap on, even though I don't consciously know how to do this, there is a part of me that does know. I'm open to receiving messages from my soul, and I'm open to letting go of if that feels true. I don't think when we do tapping we should impose things on ourselves. Maybe tap on being open to letting get down barriers to a particular issue that we need to work on. So that is just my just an off-the-cuff reaction to healing modalities, you might suggest.
I felt there were some very useful pointers, like pointers towards writing and teaching in certain charts.
Yes.
I was very struck by like a strong figure as husband destiny.
Yes.
I particularly myself valued being pointed towards Rama. And, I do identify with that. When I write my novels, I feel really happy. I create a world where the Rama energy, the divine hero's quest is expressed and lived in.
So what you could do there, I suppose you could, if you're using EFT, you could tap on any resistance or lack of confidence you might have into embodying that, or you could use you could use something visual to represent something that we're being called to become, and even like meditate on that or embody it, walk round as something. I remember some workshop you did where you had somebody walking around as a lioness because their nakshatra was the lioness one. Yes. So I think there are ways in which we can almost role play a part of us that we haven't yet fully expressed in the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is, yeah. I mean, obviously, Navamsha is like a very big topic indeed, and I hope that the webinar has made it clear what its study can offer. And as I said, if people wanted to go further, that would be so good. So I suppose we had better end it now.
Yeah, what I like is that you have given people the tools to do their own Navamsha exercise, and hopefully the inspiration to do it. And I think that's very good, because I think when we discover things for ourselves, we can feel even more empowered than having everything, presented to us on a plate. So I think that's good, and be interested to hear people's feedback on that.
Yes, definitely.
Maybe in Facebook group, and maybe look forward to reading what people might have discovered about themselves as a result.
So thank you indeed for that. So I just want to say I'll get the papers out for the prediction for our predictive astrology for 2016 as soon as I can. And I can't remember if I said, I don't think I did. As soon as the schools have gone back in January, I'm actually going to look at the astrology of 2016, set up a webinar to do that. So look at what the Vedic transits are and what the Western transits are. So we'll be looking in a sense at our own year ahead in 2 weeks' time, and we'll be looking at the year ahead early in January. I think schools go back on the 6th, something like that. So I'll be doing it, let's say, setting it up for the 8th. Okay, thank you most sincerely to everybody. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.